friends. I want to share a story with you guys that's pretty interesting. Here recently, an ATF agent, actually within the last couple of days, has resigned from the ATF. And he resigned only 2 years prior to retirement, or at least when he's eligible for retirement, which means a full pension. Think about that. You got a guy who spent 18 years in an organization and got a measly 2 years away from being able to get full pension and full benefits, and he walks away from it. It takes a pretty big deal to make a person do that. It takes kind of a life-changing event or a series of life-changing events to alter that person's course 2 years prior to be able to get those types of benefits. The agent's name is Brandon Garcia, worked out of the Arizona office. You may remember his name. Brandon Garcia was loosely tied to Fast and Furious. If you remember Eric Holder's and Barack Obama's gun running scheme, where we illegally traffic firearms to Mexico, only to have some of them come back into the United States and actually kill a Border Patrol agent with the guns that our government trafficked to Mexico illegally. Okay, Mr. Garcia was actually part of that. In fact, it appears that he was used as somewhat of a scapegoat or a fall guy in that. Because while they do blame him for a lot of what happened in some investigations that took place back in the 20-teens, they also kind of let him off the hook. It's almost like they told him, hey dude, you're new, you're young, if you want to be here for a long time, you got to take the fall for this one, so we're not going to discipline you, which whoever gets disciplined for doing something wrong in the federal government, but we're not going to discipline you. You're going to take the fall, but we're going to cover for you and you'll get promotions after that, which, by the way, he is a frontline supervisor as of today. So clearly he did receive promotions over time and didn't get deemed for it within the organization. So it seems like he might have been rewarded. Brandon wrote a lengthy 6-page letter, and the irony is not lost on me that his name is Brandon, by the way. A 6-page letter explaining why he's leaving the ATF. Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing and bore you. In fact, I'll probably read too much of it, and I'll bore you with this. But bear with me. There are some key points in here. Keep in mind, this is a person internally who worked for the federal government for 18 years, and these are the things that he saw over the course of that time. He mentions early in his letter, I don't know what the mission really is anymore, but I don't like it. Further down, he says, we as agents are required to set aside our personal and political opinions and do our job. Why does that same standard not apply to the entire Department of Justice? Now, obviously, no fan of the restrictions and lockdowns that were incurred as a result of the man-made virus. He states that I am confident that the agents and officers regularly working violent crime and going toe-to-toe with the most violent criminals on the streets are not worried about dying from COVID, or if everyone is vaccinated or wearing a mask, or if they can telework. He goes on to say the government is creating this issue. The government is dividing us. Of course, none of us needed to hear that from somebody because we already see that, but it's interesting to see a person who was cashing a government paycheck say those things. We are becoming a country that focuses on extremes, and all the good people in the middle are the ones suffering. Instead of being a rational voice, the government is only adding fuel to the fire. I don't feel like our leadership is fighting for the agents or for police in general. They seem to be going along with the attitude of the current administration. Why are we so afraid of educating politicians with the truth? Our agency talks a lot about developing real leaders. If our leaders are afraid or unwilling to fight back against things that they know are wrong, maybe they are not leaders. Well, clearly they're not. Because they said so, or because I said so, should never be an acceptable answer for a leader, and those phrases are never used by a real leader. A long time ago, when I was a brand new patrol officer in Albuquerque, my training officer told me, if you have to say the words, I'm in charge, then you are not in charge. Our government tends to punish, shame, or pressure employees into compliance rather than motivate. We see that a lot. We see that everywhere in politics. The goal is never to reason with you. The goal is always to shame you into changing your opinion and making it like the person who is attempting to shame you. Now, here's some internal stuff that interested me. In a meeting not too long ago, the deputy director told us that ATF is not aligned with either political party, which is the way it should be, but also intriguing to me that he felt the need to emphasize it. However, ATF's recent actions sure seem to align with the left. Over the last couple of years, ATF has been spending a significant amount of time talking about and changing the course of this agency to focus on the gun. Frankly, I don't really care about investigating the gun. I care about investigating the criminal and then plucking the criminal out of society. Last year, headquarters spent pretty much the entire year talking about the vaccine and threatening termination for those who wouldn't get it. Yet the deputy director threatened to prosecute the agents for lying to a federal agent if we did not appropriately update our vaccination status in the system. It seems a bit extreme. I've never even threatened a criminal with that charge. The push was clearly political, and I wanted no part of it. Goes down a little bit and says they knew they had no legal grounds, so they used the leftist tactics of shaming, excluding, and threatening into compliance. There is no telling how many agents got vaccinated for the sole purpose of keeping their jobs and their pension. Now that's sad to me. We saw that everywhere. We saw that in the airlines. We saw that in sports. We saw it everywhere. And looking back on it, so many people were intimidated. And I don't care how big and bad you are. I'm talking, people mostly get intimidated up here. It's not always here. And it's not always here. It's usually right here. They get intimidated because they get mind effed along the way. And people take advantage of that, and they bully people mentally. And in many cases, like what he's talking about, so many people took an experimental thing. I don't want to say the word because it'll get this video immediately demonetized or canceled or whatever. But they took this experiment, and now they look back on it, and I think they regret it because they realized there was no real teeth behind it, just like Brandon says right here. But nevertheless, the damage is already done. We did not become ATF agents so we could collect data, ensure firearms are in compliance, seize trigger groups, argue about what a firearm is or is not, seize firearms for reasons other than prosecuting criminals, or spend countless hours inputting data to justify someone else's existence in headquarters. He's right. The original intent of that organization may have been to do the things that he's explaining here, but clearly they have evolved into some kind of hall monitoring service against people that are easier to work with, law-abiding people, rather than the criminals out there. In other words, they've taken the easy road. There's a fork in the road, and they've taken the path of least resistance because sure makes my job a lot easier instead of going down this path where there's actual criminals at the end of it, but it might be a little bit harder work. So let's take the easy path instead. He says for at least the last decade, the government has focused on holding police accountable. I agree, we do need to be held accountable, but every